He was just a scared little pup, punished for every mistake, beaten for every moment he didn't understand. But what they didn't know was that their cruelty wasn't teaching him obedience. It was shattering his spirit. A young K9 German Shepherd who was supposed to serve, protect, and save lives. But before he ever got that chance, he was nearly destroyed by the very system that was supposed to shape him. Left shaking, terrified, and unable to even turn his head without trembling. This pup was all but forgotten, until one person saw past the fear and gave him a second chance no one else thought he deserved. He was just 6 months old when his world changed forever. His name was Axel, and if you saw him then, ears too big for his head, legs slightly clumsy, tail that never quite stopped wagging, you'd probably smile. He had the look of a dog who was meant for something great, not just because of his bloodline, not just because he was a German Shepherd, but because of the fire in his eyes, the curiosity, the eagerness to please. To someone with compassion, Axel was full of promise, but to the wrong hands, he was a disappointment waiting to happen. From the outside, he fit the mold perfectly. Broad chest, strong jaw, a thick coat that shimmered when the light hit it. He had the kind of presence people expected from a future K9 unit dog. You looked at him, and you saw potential. But none of them saw the pup. They only saw a product, and they wanted that product ready, fast. The facility he was taken to wasn't what you'd call a warm place. It was cold, sterile, and all business. Concrete walls, steel cages, barking echoing through the halls. No toys, no blankets, no comfort, just structure, commands, and consequences. Axel didn't know what was happening. One moment, he was with his littermates, curled up in a pile of warmth and safety. The next, he was alone, surrounded by strangers, dragged into a new world that moved too fast, too loud, and didn't wait for him to catch up. At first, he tried. He really did. He'd tilt his head, trying to understand the words they shouted. He'd wag his tail when someone came close. He'd bounce on his paws, ready to chase a ball or follow a lead. But every time he misunderstood a command or hesitated, even for a second, the smiles disappeared. The voices turned sharp. The hands turned heavy. They didn't have time for patience. Not in their eyes. They weren't there to raise dogs. They were there to build them. Like machines, obedient, emotionless, controlled, and anything less was treated as failure. Axel started to notice things. When he barked out of excitement, he was scolded. When he whimpered from confusion, he was ignored. And when he froze up from fear, that's when the belt came out. He didn't understand why. He just knew that sometimes, when he got scared or confused, pain followed. And that pain didn't come from strangers. It came from the people who were supposed to train him. The ones who said his name in tones that turned bitter. They called him stupid, dumb dog, waste of space. Words he didn't understand, but tones he couldn't ignore. There was one handler in particular, a man named Carson, middle-aged, impatient, and proud of the results he got with old-school methods. He believed in breaking dogs to make them obedient, believed that pain taught lessons. That fear was respect. He used to say, if the mud ain't scared of you, it won't protect you. Carson made Axel his personal project. He pushed him harder than the others, forced him into drills he wasn't ready for, punished him for mistakes he hadn't even understood, slapped his snout when he flinched, yanked his leash when he lagged, shoved him back into his kennel with a growl when he hesitated at the door. Axel's world became a blur of barking, shouting, yanking, slapping, and silence. There was no play, no affection, no comfort. He started to shut down. His eyes, once bright and full of spark, dimmed. He stopped wagging his tail. He stopped looking people in the eyes. He stopped barking entirely. The other handlers started whispering about him. That one's broken, too soft, not K9 material. Some even suggested putting him down. After all, what good is a dog that won't respond? That shakes in a corner? That can't even make eye contact? But Carson wasn't ready to give up, not because he cared, but because to him, Axel was a challenge, a dog who needed to be fixed, to prove a point. So he pushed harder. More drills, less food, less rest, more punishments for every slip. Axel began to shake, literally. He developed a nervous twitch in his neck. At first, it only happened during training, but then it started even in his kennel, even when no one was around. He couldn't turn his head without his body following in a jolt, like his brain couldn't separate movement from fear anymore. And worst of all, no one cared. Axel had stopped trying. The fire in his belly, snuffed out. The joy in his bark, gone. The hope in his eyes, drowned in fear. He wasn't the same puppy that walked through the gates of the training facility. That dog, the curious, eager to please little guy, was buried beneath layers of trauma. What remained was a shell, moving through drills by instinct, eyes darting, muscles twitching, always waiting for the next blow. And yet, the punishments didn't stop. In fact, they escalated. Because when a dog like Axel stops responding the way they want, they don't ask why. They don't wonder what they're doing wrong. They assume the dog is defective. Carson doubled down. Sit, he'd bark. Axel would sit, a second too slow. Whack, focus. Carson would scream. Axel's ears would flatten. He'd tremble. He didn't even know what he was doing wrong anymore. You want to be useless your whole life. Carson spat one day, after Axel had frozen in place during a bomb-sniffing drill. You're lucky I haven't put a bullet in your skull. Those words weren't an empty threat. Dogs had been retired early from the program before. Some disappeared quietly. No ceremony, no goodbyes, just gone. And every handler knew exactly what that meant. Axel didn't know that, of course, but he felt it. The way Carson looked at him, the tension in the leash, the silence after he made a mistake, the way other handlers started walking past his cage without a second glance. He was fading, but there was one person who noticed. A junior trainee, fresh into the program, quiet, observant. His name was Ryan. He'd been assigned to observe the senior handlers and learn their methods. But what he saw disturbed him. Ryan had joined the canine unit because he loved dogs. He believed in their power, not just their strength, but their loyalty, their sensitivity, their intelligence. But nothing about what Carson did to Axel looked like training. It looked like control, fear, psychological warfare against a 6-month-old puppy who didn't understand what he'd done wrong. Ryan started paying attention. He noticed the way Axel flinched when someone raised their hand too fast, how he wouldn't eat unless no one was watching, how he licked the corner of his cage obsessively, as if trying to soothe himself. It wasn't behavior, it was trauma. But speaking up wasn't easy. Carson was a veteran, respected, feared. No one questioned his methods. If Ryan challenged him, he could be kicked out of the program, or worse, blacklisted in the field he'd worked so hard to enter. So Ryan waited, he watched, and he tried gently to make a connection. One evening, when the facility was quiet and most of the handlers had gone home, Ryan lingered. He walked slowly toward Axel's kennel. The moment the pup saw him, he shrank back into the corner, trembling, wide-eyed. Ryan crouched. "It's okay, buddy," he whispered. Axel didn't move, so Ryan didn't either. He just stayed there, quiet, still, not reaching through the bars, not calling his name, just present. That was the first time Axel didn't flinch. It became a pattern. Every evening, Ryan would sit near the kennel for a few minutes. No demands, no training, just soft murmurs and calm breathing. And slowly, Axel began to lift his head. Then one night he stood up. Another night, he took a step forward. And then, weeks later, he sniffed Ryan's hand through the bars. It wasn't much, but it was the first choice Axel had made in a long time that wasn't driven by fear. Ryan knew then there was still something alive in him, but time was running out. Carson was preparing the final evaluation, a test Axel was almost guaranteed to fail. And if he failed, the dog would be removed from the program. The words were cold, clinical, sanitized, but everyone knew what they meant. Ryan couldn't let that happen, so he made a decision, one that could cost him everything. He approached the program director, a stern man named Briggs who rarely smiled and almost never questioned his senior handlers. But he had one weakness. He loved results. Ryan came prepared. He laid it all out. Axel's abuse, the psychological trauma, the nervous twitch, the lack of progress, not from the dog's shortcomings, but from the handler's cruelty. At first, Briggs was unmoved, until Ryan said something that made him stop in his tracks. "You're about to destroy a dog with potential because you trusted the wrong man." Briggs looked up. "I'm asking for 1 week. Just one. Let me work with him. No Carson, no beatings, just training with patience. If Axel doesn't improve, I'll leave the program myself." It was a bold offer, but Briggs agreed. 1 week, that's all Ryan had. 7 days to undo months of trauma. 7 days to reach a broken heart hiding inside a trembling body. 7 days to prove that love, not fear, could train a hero. The next morning, the training facility felt different. Carson wasn't there. Ryan had arrived early, and Axel had already noticed the change. His eyes were alert, scanning the room like he couldn't believe it was real. No shouting, no looming shadow, no tension in the air. Ryan approached the kennel with a slow, easy step. "Morning, Axel," he said softly, kneeling again. The dog stared at him, still unsure, still scarred, but there was no retreating this time, no cowering, just watching. Ryan unlatched the kennel door. Axel didn't move. He didn't bolt. didn't rush, didn't attack. He just stood frozen, unsure what to expect. He hadn't been let out gently before. Usually, it came with a yank of the leash and a bark command. "Come on, buddy," Ryan whispered. "We're gonna go slow today. No pressure." He clipped the leash gently onto Axel's collar and stepped back, giving the dog space. It took a full minute before Axel finally moved. One step, then another, then a pause. His legs trembled, but he kept walking, out into the open. And that morning, instead of drills or barking commands, Ryan did something revolutionary. He let Axel sniff the grass. The pup's nose twitched. His ears perked. It was something so simple, so normal. But to Axel, it was a forgotten luxury. He sniffed. He looked up. He sniffed again. Then, tentatively, he wagged his tail, just once. Ryan noticed. He didn't react too much. Didn't scare him off with excitement. He just smiled, a flicker of hope blooming in his chest. The session that day wasn't about obedience. It was about trust. Ryan gave Axel space to explore, but stayed close. He spoke softly, moved slowly, offered treats, but didn't force them. And by the end of the hour, Axel had taken one, gently, from his hand. That was day one. On day two, they started with basic commands, but without pressure. Ryan used encouragement, not intimidation. If Axel hesitated, he didn't scold. He waited, rewarded effort, not perfection, celebrated eye contact, praised every little success. Axel didn't respond like the other dogs. Not yet, but for the first time, he seemed curious. He tilted his head when Ryan spoke. He followed, nervously, but willingly. Day three, they introduced toys. Axel didn't understand at first. A ball meant nothing to him, a rope toy, just another object to be thrown at him. But Ryan didn't give up. He played alone at first, showing Axel the toy wasn't a threat. He'd toss it gently, make silly sounds, waggle it in the grass. And eventually, Axel approached, not to play, just to watch. But he watched with interest. Day 4 brought the first real breakthrough. During a quiet moment, when the sun filtered through the trees and the noise of the facility had died down, Axel trotted up beside Ryan. No leash, no command. He just chose to be near him. And Ryan, he didn't move, didn't praise, didn't ruin the moment. He just let Axel sit beside him. That night, Axel slept peacefully for the first time in months. One of the night staff peeked in and saw something astonishing. Axel was on his side, breathing slow, legs twitching in a dream. No pacing, no barking, no crying, just rest. Something was working, but not everyone was happy. Word of Ryan's unorthodox methods had started to spread. Some of the senior handlers mocked him behind his back. "You turning that mutt into a therapy dog or what? He's just a waste of time. Should have been put down weeks ago." Ryan ignored them. But Carson, he was furious. He'd been called in by Briggs and informed that Axel had been placed under new supervision, that Ryan had been given a trial week. Carson hadn't said much, but the look in his eyes, pure rage. And Ryan knew it was only a matter of time before he came back. So day 5 became critical. Ryan stepped up the exercises. He introduced Axel to mock scenarios, scent tracking, obstacle courses, and alert drills. Nothing complex, just the basics. And Axel, he surprised everyone. He wasn't fast, he wasn't polished, but he was trying. He followed sense. He sat when asked. He began responding to his name, with a spark of recognition in his eyes. And for the first time, during a mock alert drill, he barked. A real bark. Loud, confident, clear. The facility fell silent. No one had heard Axel bark before. Not like that. Ryan beamed. Axel looked up at him, tail wagging, as if asking, "Did I do it right?" "You did amazing," Ryan whispered, kneeling to hug him. And Axel didn't flinch. He leaned into it. By day 6, Ryan knew the final evaluation was coming. Briggs had been watching quietly from the sidelines, observing the transformation, taking notes. And while he didn't say much, Ryan could tell he was impressed. But day 7, that would be the real test. A live simulation, with other handlers, with distractions, and Carson would be in the room. Ryan wasn't sure how Axel would react, but he had to believe, because Axel had come too far to go back now. The day of the live simulation had arrived. The air was thick with tension, more than any other day before. Axel sat quietly beside Ryan, leash loose, eyes bright but nervous. The other handlers whispered among themselves, some openly skeptical, some barely hiding their smirks. Carson stood across the training ground, arms crossed, watching every move like a hawk. The simulation began. Axel was sent into a mock scenario, searching for a hidden suspect in a dense area filled with distractions, barking dogs, sirens blaring, sudden shouts. The crowd expected failure, But Axel, this scared little pup, who once trembled at the slightest sound, moved cautiously, but with purpose. His nose twitched as he sniffed the air. He paused, focused, and then he charged forward. He found the suspect, a trainer hidden behind a stack of crates, and barked sharply. Clear, loud, precise. Ryan's heart pounded. The room fell silent. Even Carson's eyes widened just a little. Axel repeated the exercise, each time with growing confidence and speed. He was learning, growing, thriving. When the simulation ended, Ryan knelt next to Axel and whispered, "You did it, buddy. You really did it." Suddenly, Carson stepped forward. The entire training ground tensed. Ryan held his breath. Carson looked down at Axel. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, almost grudgingly, he nodded. "You've surprised me," he admitted. "But this doesn't mean he's there yet." Ryan smiled, knowing this was the closest thing to praise he'd get. Axel wagged his tail. For the first time, he didn't brace for punishment. He trusted. Ryan knew the road ahead was still long. There would be hard days. There would be setbacks. But something had shifted. Axel wasn't just a scared pup anymore. He was a fighter, a survivor, a future hero. And the real challenge? That wasn't training Axel to obey commands. It was teaching the people around him how to believe in second chances. Axel's story didn't end when the training yard fell silent after that surprising simulation. In many ways, that was just the beginning. The real work, the healing, the rebuilding of trust, the reshaping of a scared little pup into a confident canine was only starting. When Ryan first met Axel, he saw more than just a trembling dog with scared eyes. He saw a heart that was desperate to love and be loved back. Ryan knew that if Axel was ever going to reach his true potential, the old methods of fear and punishment had to end. It was going to take patience, kindness, and a lot of time. At first, the smallest things were a challenge. Axel flinched at sudden movements. Loud noises made him freeze, sometimes shaking uncontrollably. When Ryan tried to touch his head or collar, Axel would shrink back, eyes wide with terror. It broke Ryan's heart, but he understood that Axel's fear was not a sign of weakness. It was a scar from the cruelty he'd endured. Ryan started slow. Instead of commands barked at full volume, he used a gentle tone. Instead of harsh corrections, he offered treats and praise. Every tiny step forward, Axel looking Ryan in the eye, Axel wagging his tail, Axel taking a tentative step toward him, was celebrated like a victory. Slowly, Axel began to change. The nervous twitch in his neck started fading. He no longer trembled when he turned his head. Instead, he looked around with curious eyes. The fear was still there, but it was no longer the center of his world. Ryan introduced Axel to new environments, starting with quiet spaces where Axel could feel safe. They went on walks through calm parks instead of noisy streets. Ryan brought toys and played games that encouraged Axel to focus on fun instead of fear. But healing is never a straight line. There were days when Axel would suddenly freeze or run away, overwhelmed by a memory or a noise. Ryan learned to recognize these moments and give Axel space, letting him know he wasn't alone. With time, Axel's confidence grew. He started to understand that Ryan was different from the people who had hurt him before. Ryan wasn't there to punish. He was there to protect, to teach, and most importantly, to love. This bond between handler and dog became the foundation for everything else. Axel began responding better to commands, not because he was scared, but because he wanted to make Ryan proud. The transformation was slow, but steady. In training sessions, Axel showed flashes of the hero he was meant to be, alert, quick, and brave. Ryan could see Axel's potential blooming in ways no one else had believed possible. Yet, despite the progress, Axel's past trauma still shadowed him. Nightmares made him restless. Loud noises in the training facility sometimes triggered panic. But each time, Ryan was there to calm him down, to remind Axel that he was safe. One day, during a particularly tough exercise, Axel hesitated. A sharp whistle command confused him, and for a split second, his old fears took over. He lowered his head and started to tremble. Ryan didn't raise his voice or show frustration. Instead, he knelt down, reached out slowly, and said softly, "It's okay, Axel. Take your time." That moment, simple and quiet, was a turning point. Axel looked up, met Ryan's eyes, and gave a small bark. Not a bark of fear, but of determination. From then on, Axel faced each challenge not as a victim but as a warrior. Ryan's patience and kindness began to unlock parts of Axel's spirit that had been buried deep under layers of fear and pain. Each day, Axel grew a little stronger, a little braver. Training sessions shifted from strict drills to games filled with encouragement. Ryan introduced Axel to agility courses, not to test him harshly, but to let Axel discover his own strength and skill at his own pace, running through tunnels, jumping over low bars, chasing after balls. These were not just exercises, they were moments of joy Axel hadn't known before. One afternoon, as Axel leapt confidently over an obstacle, Ryan caught a glimpse of something he'd almost forgotten, a spark of happiness in Axel's eyes. It was subtle, but it was there, a tiny flame of hope flickering to life. But healing a wounded soul is never easy, especially when the wounds run so deep. There were setbacks, days when Axel would cower at the sound of a raised voice, or freeze in place at the sight of a belt or a hand moving too fast. Ryan learned to read these signals. He didn't push Axel too hard. He understood that trauma had rewired Axel's brain. Trust had to be rebuilt brick by brick. Ryan also made sure Axel got the best care possible. A vet specializing in trauma recovery for working dogs was brought in. She explained how Axel's trembling wasn't just fear. It was a physical reaction to extreme stress, almost like a reflex his body had learned to protect itself. With therapy, time, and love, she assured, Axel could heal. Slowly, Axel began to respond to calming exercises, deep breathing cues, soothing massages, and gentle touches that helped him feel safe in his own skin again. Ryan's efforts paid off in small victories. Axel started resting more peacefully at night. He began sleeping through the loud noises of the training center. He even started initiating contact with Ryan, nudging his hand for pets, bringing him toys, and wagging his tail with increasing frequency. The bond between Axel and Ryan was no longer just handler and dog. It was a friendship forged through trust and care. Then came a moment that would test everything Axel had learned. During a high-pressure simulation, Axel was ordered to confront a suspect, a demanding, intense drill meant to push any K9 to their limits. The noises were loud, the commands rapid, the environment chaotic. For a moment, Axel froze. The past trauma clawed at him. His legs trembled. His head shook uncontrollably. The fear threatened to swallow him whole. But then, Ryan's calm voice cut through the noise. Axel, focus. You've got this. Axel's ears perked up. He took a deep breath, something Ryan had taught him, and moved forward. Step by step, Axel confronted the challenge. His movements became sharper, more precise. He didn't flinch. He didn't tremble. In that moment, Axel wasn't just a scared pup anymore. He was a warrior, strong, brave, and ready to face whatever came next. That breakthrough marked the beginning of a new chapter. Axel's resilience had won over the shadows of his past. He proved that no matter how broken someone might seem, with love and patience, healing is possible. The day everyone had been waiting for had finally come. Axel's final evaluation to join the K9 unit officially. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. Trainers, handlers, and supervisors stood silently, watching every move Axel made. This wasn't just any test. It was the moment that would decide Axel's future. The moment that would show if he could overcome the years of fear and pain he'd carried in his trembling body. The course was designed to challenge him like never before. Fast commands shouted over loud noises, simulated threats that would make any dog hesitate, complex obedience drills that required focus and strength. But Axel, he moved with a confidence no one expected to see from a dog who once couldn't even turn his head without shaking. His ears stood tall, eyes sharp and alert. His muscles were tense but controlled. No hesitation, no trembling, just pure determination. Then came the most intense part of the test. A man playing the role of a suspect lunged aggressively, shouting and waving his arms wildly, a scene meant to frighten any dog into submission or panic. For a split second, Axel's body froze. The old fear threatened to take over. But then, something inside him shifted. He heard Ryan's calm voice echoing in his mind. He remembered the countless hours of gentle encouragement, the slow but steady rebuilding of trust. With a low, steady growl, Axel sprang forward. He barked sharply, his body moving with precision and strength. He intercepted the suspect, holding him down with perfect control, neither too rough nor too timid. The crowd held its breath. Axel didn't just pass the test. He owned it. When Ryan stepped forward, Axel didn't cower or shake. Instead, he greeted his handler with a joyful wag of his tail and a soft, trusting lick on the hand. The room erupted into applause, cheers that felt like a release of years of pain and doubt. This moment was more than just a test result. It was a triumphant victory over trauma, over fear, over every cruel word, and every harsh hand that once told him he was stupid. Axel had transformed from a broken, frightened pup into a true hero, and as Ryan knelt down to wrap his arms around him, their bond was undeniable, a silent promise that Axel would never face fear or pain alone again. It was proof that love and patience can heal even the deepest wounds. Axel's journey was never an easy one. From a frightened, trembling pup beaten and called stupid to a confident, brave canine ready to protect and serve, his story reminds us of the incredible power of second chances. What Axel endured could have broken him forever, but instead, it became the fuel for his remarkable transformation. With patience, kindness, and unwavering love, Axel learned to trust again. He learned that he wasn't defined by the fear and pain he once lived through. He discovered his own strength, not just in his muscles, but in his spirit. This isn't just a story about a dog overcoming cruelty. It's a story about hope, about healing, about the incredible bond that can form when someone refuses to give up on a soul, no matter how lost it seems. Axel's life today stands as proof that even when the world turns its back, a little kindness can change everything. And for every dog and every person who's ever felt broken, Axel's story says this: you are never beyond repair. You are never too stupid to be loved. If Axel's story touched your heart, subscribe now to Paws and Claws for more stories of hope and second chances.